So far, when we've been talking about editing our image files, we've been dealing mostly with global issues, and we've gone through a workflow that's designed to work with the entire image at once. But there are times, even though we make that global area look as well as we can, when there are specific areas in the photograph that we want to alter, we want to fix in some way or another, to make it lighter or darker or work with contrast or color or any number of things, but we only want those changes to apply to some specific area of the file and not to all of them. Well, Photoshop contains an amazing number of ways to isolate areas. What I'm about to show you is just one of them, but it works well for me and is much faster for me than the typical way of trying to make very precise selections using some really powerful selection tools, but this is still faster for me. This still works out so much better. So let's start with the image we're going to work on. Here is a macro shot of a little flower taken in the Alabama hills. It's been globally edited to where it contains the tones and general color that is satisfactory to me. But there are things I would like to do to enhance it. For one, I would like to make these background areas darker so that this foreground, the main subject, stands out a little better. I don't want to darken the whole image. I just want to darken those specific areas. So the way that works best for me is to do it via what's called a layer mask. And that means we have to have some layers going. So the very first thing we're going to need to do is to create a duplicate layer. Well, there are several ways to do that. We could go up here to the Layers palette, click on Duplicate Layer, follow that trend through, give it a name, do whatever we wanted to, and that would give us a duplicate layer. But there are other, faster ways we can do it. One is to come down here to this. This is the layer we're working on now, our background layer. If we grab this and drag it down to this icon, which stands for a new layer, if we drag an existing layer over that new layer icon, we create a duplicate of that existing layer. So here we go. Poof, and there's our background copy. And I'm going to rename this as a duplicate just so we can follow along and not forget where we are with all of this. Now, you don't have to rename the layers. I normally don't because, as I've told you, I don't use all of those adjustment layers. I think they contribute to sloppy editing. So I normally don't have that many layers going at a time, and it's easy for me to keep track of them. But so you can keep track of where we are. I'm going to rename this. This will be our duplicate layer. Now, what we've done, for those of you that don't really understand layers, what we've done is something really kind of interesting. Let's see if we can look at a graphic that will help explain what we're doing. Here's a graphic to help us understand what actually has happened. Here was our original layer on the bottom. When we made the duplicate by clicking and dragging the original layer to the new layer icon, or by the way, we could have done it with a keyboard shortcut, which is just Command or Control J, we created this new layer on top. And basically what we have now is a stack of layers. They are both opaque at the moment. When we look at that layer icon, when we look at the layer indicator in the Layers palette, then what we see is this arrangement, and there are two parts to this that are really important to us. Number one is there's a little eyeball over here. When that eyeball is showing, we are seeing the layers that have the eyeball showing. In this case, as that graphic showed you, both layers are opaque, so we're only seeing the top. If this was transparent or missing, we'd see the bottom. We can turn those on or off just by clicking on the eyeball. If I turn the top one off, it looks like nothing has changed, but that's because these two layers are identical. We've also got over here the names of them, and if we click on those and highlight them, the layer that is highlighted, like the duplicate layer is now, is the layer that we are going to be working on. So we can change that around. We could say, now I'm working on the background, but I'm looking at the top layer. Or here, I'm looking at the top layer and working on the top layer. So we have a number of different ways we can figure out what it is we're going to be doing and how we're working on these two layers. For right now, what I'm going to do is work on the bottom layer. So I'm going to click off the eyeball on this top layer, and now we're both looking at and working on this bottom layer. And what I'm going to do here is go in and darken it, because what I want to do, like I say, is darken that background. So I'm going to go into Image, Adjustments, Levels. This is the simplest way to do it. There are plenty of others. And I'm going to pull down those dark background tones. Now the problem with this is, it of course darkened everything. And all I really want to do is just darken these areas. So I'll take that. And just so you realize we really did do something, here's our top layer again. Click back on the eyeball. Click off of it. Now we're looking at this dark background layer. And here's again a graphic to show you what it is we've done. Here's what it looks like with the bottom layer dark and the top layer normal. So now what we want to do is to create our layer mask for the duplicate layer. So we're going to activate that top layer. We're going to put the eyeball back on so you're looking at it, and then we're going to create a layer mask icon, and I'll show you how to do that. So here's our two layers. We're working at and looking at the top layer. We have changed this bottom layer, remember. Now we want to make a layer mask. So we're going to come down to this icon that looks like the little rectangle with a hole in it or a circle in it, and click on it. And what just happened was it created this indicator of a layer mask. And there are several things that are important about this. Number one, the mask we just created this way is white, and that means it's hiding whatever is beneath it. What we're going to want to do is reveal parts of what's underneath it. The other important thing is this little framework around it. If I wanted to go down and work on the background layer, you can see that frame disappeared. And when I come back to here, it didn't automatically come back. So I could use any normal brushes or anything I wanted to on this top layer. If I want to work on the layer mask again, I have to click on it, and now the framework is back. So since this is white, hiding the bottom layer, in order to reveal the bottom layer, I need to work with a black brush. Well, the minute I created this, what should happen is if you look over here to the tool palette, is I've got black and white as my foreground and background color. That should have been created automatically the minute I told it to make a layer mask. But sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. It just doesn't do it sometimes. If it hadn't, then click here on these little black and white icons. That will automatically turn foreground and background to black and white. When you want to change colors for your paintbrush, you could either click on this little double-headed arrow, and that will toggle back and forth between white and black, or you can use the X key, and that will toggle it for you. Now what we're going to do now is use this black foreground color, grab a paintbrush. I'm going to set the opacity to 100%, because in this case I want to see all the way through it. I could set it to something less and we could blend this in, but for right now let's set it to 100. I want the brush mode to be normal, and I want the brush hardness to be soft. If it's up here with a hard edge, I'm going to get this hard edge circles the brush. I want it to be soft. Almost always, unless I'm working with something with very hard edges, let's say like a building or architecture of some kind, I do most of my editing with this very, very soft brush. So now I've got the brush. Here's the brush circle. What I'm going to do is adjust this size, and I can do that with the bracket keys. I could go over here and adjust the size, but that's really clunky to have to do. It's easier just to come in and use the bracket keys. Those are the keys just to the right of the P key. The left bracket makes the brush smaller, and the right bracket makes the brush bigger. Since I'm at 100% opacity, if I sweep this black brush across here, it does not paint it black. What it does is reveal the layer underneath it. So now, take a look over here at the layers palette, and in the icon, look in the upper corner and you'll see it's black. When you are looking at this, you're looking at the top layer. Remember, that's where the eyeball is. Everything that's white is on the top layer. Anything that's black, where you've painted black, you're looking through to the layer beneath it. So let's take one more look at this to show how this works. Here, we have our duplicate layer. We're actually looking at this top layer because that's where the little eyeball is. But what I've done with that black brush is I've erased part of that top layer. So now I'm looking at the top layer, but I'm looking through the top layer to the bottom layer where I've painted in black. Now, if you want to, you can pause this tape and really review these steps below to help you with what you're doing. So in the meantime then, what I'm going to do is go back and work with the rest of this. So I'm going to want to get rid of as much of this background as I can with the black. This is a very soft brush, so it's going to blend in these areas a little better. Normally, if I'm working in a big area, what I'll do is take the smaller brush, go around the areas that I want to select. And then once I've got that done, then I'm going to go in with a bigger brush, which is faster. So I'll use the bracket keys. I'll make that brush bigger. And now I can come through and erase this area much faster. This is acting almost exactly like the eraser tool would do. But there's one big difference. If I make a mistake here, let's say that I accidentally sweep it down into here where I don't want it. Because it's a layer mask, I can now go back, change this back to white, and paint all of that back the way it used to be. I can't do that with the eraser unless I do it right away. And sometimes I'll make that mistake and not see it for several steps down the line. If I'm using the eraser, I've got to back up through the history steps, erasing all the work that I've done. But with this, I can just go back in, change the brush color, and correct that. So as I work my way through this, the final piece is going to look a little different. As I work my way through this, I'm going to be erasing all of this background area from the top, turning it dark. When we've finished, then our final is going to look like this. These background areas are dark. This has maintained exactly where it was. And so if we want to see the difference, we could make a snapshot, toggle back and forth, And there it was before we did our work, and our final looks like that. Now, there are other ways we could do this, as I mentioned earlier. We could go in with a selection tool and attempt to select these areas. But if you do that, because these are soft, then you've got to go in and start working with ways to refine that edge, to soften it, to filter it, to make it work. You can do it, and it works fine. But for me, it takes forever. This is so much faster. And what's important to understand is that we can do anything. Down here on this bottom layer, as we look through this, we could make any changes we want. Now, remember, I said that we could look at this top layer, which we are now. We're looking at the white areas, looking through this top layer wherever it's black, to this bottom layer. But I can make changes now and see what's going to happen. If I continue to look at the top layer, but work on the bottom layer, if I go in and make changes, let's make it even darker for one instance. So I'll pick up levels again. You can see only that area that I just affected is turning dark. I could do anything to that area. I could use different colors. I could get something very strange. So if I wanted to go in and change that color, I could do that. I can make that a completely different background, and it's only affecting that area where I'm looking through on this one, even though the whole bottom layer has now turned green. So the amount of control that this allows is really enormous when you want to get in and work with this. I would suggest you give this a try. Go through this a couple of times till you've got it down pretty good, and then give it a shot. I think you'll like the way it works. And I'll see you later.